afternoon, everybody. My name is Crona Clohessy and I am Tax and Policy Lead with Chartered Accountants Ireland, and I'm delighted to see you all here for the Ulster Society's Traders Support Service update. We're delighted to be joined by a number of the TSS, as it's known, team, and thank you for being here. So I suppose just some housekeeping before we launch into the presentation. The slides will be made available after the event, as will the recording. And if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to populate the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can live. So I'd love to introduce Shanali Jasani and Shanker Singham, two representatives from the TSS team that are going to present today. Shanali is going to spend about 10 minutes giving, I suppose, a brief reminder to us all of what the TSS is and does, and then she's going to hand over to Shanker, who's going to, I suppose, delve into the protocol and see what areas the TSS supports in that regard. I know they've got a team of people behind them to answer all your questions, so as I say, please get them into the chat function, or sorry, the Q&A function, not the chat function. So without further ado, I suppose I'll just hand over to Shanali, and I hope you enjoy the event.
Great, and thanks so much, Crona. I'll just pop the slides up. So as we said, we're not going to cover everything that's in the slide material, simply because we've done it hopefully a few times before with this audience. Everything's available online at our education site at NICTA, or the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy.co.uk. But really, we kind of wanted to focus in on this session to ensure that we gave the maximum amount of time available to your questions, and kind of answer as many of your queries live and kind of cover some more of the more specific issues you might have that can't really be kind of taken by the generic guidance. The main reason for that is sort of in the last maybe 4 to 5 months, even though TSS continues to develop in the background and continues to release new functionality, it's not quite as much as was being released last year, simply because we're getting closer to steady state, and almost, we'd like to think a good majority of the more complex journeys are now being covered by the TSS. Hopefully some of you are more familiar with, we are now supporting, rest of world goods, so things that are being shipped into Northern Ireland, flown into Northern Ireland, not just goods that move from Great Britain, sort of in that direction. We also have extended to support some more of the special procedures. So if you move goods in and out of warehouses, if you move goods for processing, etc., there's a whole range of support that's now available on the TSS, and we're happy to come back to that later. So we thought instead we'd use the time to just kind of do a quick rip around of the acronyms, double check that we're all comfortable with the main parts of the process. What are the key hints for when you're completing supplementary declarations? And then, as we said, we'll hand over to Shanker to kind of give you a bit more of a sort of a better insight into what's happening of the world of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So just a really quick reminder of what the TSS does and doesn't do. As you know, we're a completely free to use digital service. We came into effect as soon as the Northern Ireland Protocol was effected on the 1st of January last year. Hard to believe we've now been live for almost 18 months now. So really, really proud of the service that's been stood up. And as we said, we've really sort of taken the time to understand what traders do like, what they didn't like, what needed to be extended. And as we said, huge amounts of functionality has really been produced. So if there's anything throughout the presentation that you'd like to call out in terms of what you could see, or that things that have gone really well in particular, that would be really, really great feedback for us. As you know, we're sort of contracted by HMRC, first and foremost, to ensure that all traders moving goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and now rest of world into Northern Ireland, were able to have a platform to do that in. So what the TSS did was create a digital platform that operates 24/7 and enables you to send declarations through in that way. You can also keep them in draft status, etc. But the point is, it's there, it's online, and it's fully available to support your sort of supply chain needs. One of the biggest focuses of TSS has always been education and engagement. So as I said earlier, we stood up the site NICTA. We've done tons and tons of these types of sessions, and we've really tried to be as interactive as possible to make sure that all businesses understood, what has changed, why it's changed, and what that means for their business process, and where does the TSS journey fit into that. Hopefully you're quite familiar with NICTA, but if you're not, we do urge you, please do take a look. We have, a wealth of material ranging from user guides, data guides, sort of short demo videos, through to much more detailed webinars where you'll see Shanker and I pop up quite a lot. But it's all available. It's completely free. You don't need a government gateway account to use it. So please do take a look and kind of familiarise yourself if you haven't already. If at any point behind the digital service, behind the education, you need that kind of human level of support, we have stood up quite a large contact centre to help with those kind of more complex queries. We have tiers of agents who range, from those who are there to able to take kind of your inbound calls all the way through to some of the consultants you'll see on this call who, they're called tier 3 agents, they're specialist consultants, and they're able to kind of walk you through your much more complex queries and understand why you might be getting error codes, or are you actually, submitting a declaration in a way that makes sense for your company. So that's sort of what the TSS does do. It's always worth noting there are some things that we don't do. As I said, because we are free to use and because we serve the entire market of traders moving goods between Great Britain, Northern Ireland and rest of the world into Northern Ireland, we're not really able to provide that personalised approach that you would expect from a typical customs broker. So we do normally say, if you've kind of got to a point, as we said, almost a year and a half into the Northern Ireland Protocol, and you still have loads of questions about the process, or you'd like someone to take you a bit further than what the TSS does and really look at your business, what's the most economically advantageous routes, etc. We do urge you, please go take a look at the current market that's there. There are a number of really great businesses, whether they're shipping companies or customs brokers themselves, that have really stood up quite a lot of service to help specifically with these sorts of queries. So please do take a look. That's also really important because, as you'll sort of note at the bottom of the screen there, TSS is contracted on a temporary basis. It's very much was brought in to help with that immediate sort of brand new requirements, the administrative burden on traders, etc. But eventually it will exit the market in order to ensure that trade kind of continues as normal. So it's really important to make sure there's a really strong network of customs and intermediary support across the UK. And finally, probably not super relevant to this group, but if you do move goods such as food, meat products, etc., maybe excise goods, there are additional things that you need to do, whether it's an excise permit or an export health certificate, for example, that we cannot raise within the remit of TSS, but we can tell you exactly where you need them, why you need them, and which government department to go to in order to get them, and then where they fit again in your TSS journey. I won't spend too long on these. These are slightly outdated, but it's just really good to see, as that the metrics continue to rise. I think we've now submitted something like over 5 or 6 million declarations in total, and we continue to have 100% availability. And we do always urge you, when you are talking to your clients, if they haven't already heard of the API, to please take a look into it, because if you're a bulk mover or any type of business that moves, thousands of movements a month, it might be worth looking into setting up an API, which essentially allows your sort of business, your company sort of inner technology to talk to the TSS, and it just pushes and pulls the data. So instead of you having to sit there and manually key in thousands of declarations a month, you can just have the tech kind of set up a template and it does it all automatically. And we've had traders complete, 20,000 declarations on a weekend in that way. So really, really, really useful tool if you haven't heard of it already. So what we'll do now is just have a really quick look at what does the process actually look like. I'm sure, as you know, we kind of have a habit of talking in non-stop 3-letter acronyms. So it's always kind of helpful just to take it back to the beginning. When we sort of look at the general TSS journey, there are 3 declarations we normally refer to. The first is the entry summary, the ENS, or the safety and security declaration. This is essentially a security declaration that you need whenever you enter the EU security zone, which Northern Ireland forms part of. This is typically, as you'll see on the next slide, done by your haulier, and that's because it involves not only sort of a basic description of the goods, who's the buyer, who's the seller, what are the business identifications for the EORI numbers, and finally, what's the vehicle information, which is why we put the onus on the hauliers to do that as the transporters. You then have your customs import declaration, which hopefully, as most of you are familiar with, TSS took a decision in order sort of to prioritise the flow of goods into Northern Ireland on day one. We split the declaration into 2 halves. The first half is the Simplified Frontier Declaration, or the SFD. Pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's a simplified data set. And these sort of steps 1 and step 2 are done before the goods move. And then the final step is the supplementary declaration, which is typically done by the trader or whoever's being registered as the importer of record. They will log on, and that's kind of where you get into the more sort of meaty stuff. What's the tariffs, the commodity codes? Are you claiming preference? Are you claiming under a special procedure, etc.? And it's at that point duties might be due. And then, as you can see in step 4, there's also a new full frontier declaration that is essentially just the customs import deck as a whole which you'll need to do before the goods move. And there's no right or wrong answer. As I said, we chose the simplified route to help the majority of traders kind of get their goods into Northern Ireland, and then you have a bit more time to work out all of the data that you need to complete the supplementary declaration. But if as a business, you have all the data ready, you've got used to the process, and from a cash flow perspective, you're able to pay any duties up front, then the FFD route might be a better move for you. It really is just down to your business processes. So this is just a slightly more visual representation of what we were just talking about. We always say at step 1, double check what your Incoterms are. This is really important because it will define who does what on the TSS process. So for example, most of the TSS model is built around the Northern Ireland buyer, the person receiving the goods, as being the importer of record, meaning they are the one that's responsible for interacting with the TSS, and ultimately they will be responsible for paying any duties if required. If, however, you move goods under an Incoterm such as delivered duty paid or DDP, it might be the GB supplier or the GB arm of your business that's responsible. So it might save you a bit of a hassle. So it's really worth checking kind of the roles and responsibilities here. So then once you kind of figured out who it is that's doing what, step 1 is generally your haulier or your carrier will log on to the TSS system, and they'll put in that basic description of the goods, where are the goods coming from, where are they going to, and all the vehicle information to complete the safety and security deck. TSS will then send that to the relevant government system known as ICS in Northern Ireland. We then, to make it even simpler, use the exact same data set that your haulier has provided. So the basic goods description, where the goods are coming from, where they're going, and the vehicle information. And we take that and we generate that first half of that customs deck, the simplified frontier deck. We automatically complete that for you, and we send that to CDS, which is the customs system operating in Northern Ireland and soon to be across the rest of the UK. So at that point, both those declarations have been submitted. If they're validated, you get back what's known as the clearances in the form of movement reference numbers, or MRNs. As I said, lots and lots of acronyms, so I apologise now. We pass those back through to you on the portal of the trader support service.co.uk. But that's really important now because this is all being done before your goods moved. And at that point, the haulier needs to complete an additional step of logging onto another government system known as GVMS, or the Goods Vehicle Movement System. This is it's a HMRC system that essentially is tracking the movement across the Irish Sea. So what they'll need to do is they'll log on to GVMS, they'll put in those 2 clearances, so one for the safety and security deck, one for the simplified frontier or the customs deck. GVMS will validate those, and if it's satisfied that you've done the right levels of compliance, it will return its own clearance in the form of a barcode known as a GMR, or a goods movement reference. This step is really key because when your haulier or your transporter, whether it's a freight forwarder or not, gets to that sort of the port of exit on the Great Britain side, so for example Liverpool, they won't be able to board the ferry if it's clear that they're a freight vehicle without that GMR. That it's the ferry operator's obligation to make sure that the compliance has been done. So please make sure that you are comfortable with that step. At that point, the scanning of that barcode lets TSS know, okay, this journey is live, and we ping whoever was listed as being the importer of record in that first declaration. So really important here to know who it is that's doing what. We will ping them to say, okay, your goods have now moved. You have until the 4th working day of the following month to log back onto the TSS portal and complete your supplementary declaration. And as we said, at that point, if there are any duties applicable, that's when you would have to pay them. And as I said earlier, if you wanted to complete the full frontier, so that whole customs deck up front, you can absolutely do so. The journey, as you can see, looks pretty much the same. Your haulier is going to log on, complete the security deck, and instead you as the trader, you will log on, complete the full frontier deck, you'll pay any duties, and at that point, your end of the journey is complete, and your haulier will log on to GVMS, the movement is tracked, and then once your delivery is made in Northern Ireland, this import is complete. As I said, we've got lots of information in the slides that we probably won't go through, but I would like to take your attention to, if we scroll down to the key tips here. So as we said, what we're focusing on here is the supplementary declaration, so that the second half that happens once the goods have moved. This is, as we know, has been, it's the bigger pain point because simply it's where you need the most data. It's where the error codes come up. So this is really where we've spent most of our sort of time on educating traders on. And I can assume you'd have a lot of clients that feel this way. You've got to absolutely reassure them that you cannot get away with not doing the SDI, the supplementary declaration. It is a legal requirement. Your import isn't complete without it. And again, just a reminder on the timelines. But here's pretty much what the last slide I'll spend time on. is please familiarize yourself with these sort of checklist items, because this is really the best way to navigate them. When you're completing your subdeck, do you know what your tariff options are? Do you have a strategy that you're going into to double check that you're not paying duty that you might not owe? This is really, really important. Hopefully you're sort of familiar with the terms, are your goods at risk or not at risk? All that means is saying if you are a UK business moving goods within the UK, your goods are not at risk of entering the EU. They stay within the UK, so you might not need to pay any duty because they haven't exited the customs area. In which case, the best way to make sure you can claim that your goods are not at risk is to be on that step 2, the UK trader scheme. If you haven't registered already, if your clients haven't, please urge them to, because it is by far the easiest way. It's free to register. HMRC just does a bit of due diligence to double check that you do fall within the correct categories and criteria, and then you have the authorization in order to be able to claim the code that puts all of your duties at 0 for those movements. So really, really important that you double check whether you're eligible for that. And then there's a whole load of stuff that comes under, well, if my goods, I can't be on the UK TS for whatever reason, because there are certain criteria that you might be exempted from. Or say you move mixed loads, some stay in Northern Ireland, some move down into Dublin, for example. How can you help understand your tariff responsibility here? So these are the steps that we advise you to go to, because it's really, really important just to check that you're kind of doing the best thing for your business. So first step is, check. You might not even have a tariff, for example, if under the goods agreement you have a 0 rate. So double check that, because that might save you a lot of effort. Step 2 is get on the UK trader scheme if you haven't already. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, can you claim preference based on the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement? This will help you reduce your tariff potentially all the way to 0, but they can be a bit difficult to navigate. So if you are interested, there's a load of guidance on NICTA, and there's like a 2-hour webinar that Shanker's done delving into each of the steps. So please do take a look if you haven't already. And finally, if steps 1, 2, and 3 don't work, and actually you don't move goods at a very high frequency into Northern Ireland, or they're at very low value, you may be able to claim what's known as the waiver, which essentially says if they fall within I think it's €200,000 threshold within 3 fiscal years, they're sort of seen as being extremely low risk of entering the EU. So they'll call them, essentially they waive the duty, hence why it's called a duty waiver, and you don't need to pay any of the tariff liability. So loads of, those are really the 4 that we say, are your goods already at a 0 rate? Can you bring them down to 0 and declare them not at risk under the UK trader scheme? If you can't be on that, can you claim preference to reduce it to 0? And finally, if none of those work, can you claim the waiver? I'll pause there. You will get these slides which cover all of this in more detail and talk a bit more about, obviously your 5th step might be, can you use a custom special procedure as well? But on that note, I can see there's some questions, and I'll hand over to Shanker.
Great, thanks very much, Shonali. So what we thought we'd do at this point, and it's very opportune, I know this session was scheduled some time ago, but it's obviously a very opportune moment to talk about potential changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, as unfortunately, there's a lot of coverage of this in the media, none of it particularly enlightening. So I think my hope is that we can use this session to sort of wade through some of the media noise on this that you'll no doubt have been reading. And what I would like to do is do what I can to give you as much information as I can, and enable you to better advise your clients based on that information. I'm not going to be saying anything that is confidential or secret in any way. I mean, you can, everything I'm going to say is sort of largely in the public domain, but there's a lot in the public domain, some of which is just not true and not accurate. So I hope this can help guide you through the minefield out there. So essentially what is going to happen, what should have happened yesterday, I think it is now going to happen on Monday, is that there will be this much talked about legislation that the UK government is going to introduce on the Northern Ireland Protocol. This does not mean that negotiations with the EU have stopped. Negotiations with the EU continue. That said, there will be legislation, and the legislation will broadly say, and to get more detail on this, I would refer you to two things. I mean, you'll have a lot of material on Monday when the legislation comes out, and we will be providing information as well. But the Foreign Office obviously will also be providing a lot of information. But I would look at, in anticipation of that, I would look at the statement that the Foreign Secretary made in the House of Commons, I think about 2.5 weeks ago. I would also refer to the statement that the Northern Ireland Minister, Conor Burns, made to the Northern Ireland Committee yesterday, I think yesterday morning, which reflects the government sort of position on this. And so what the bill will cover broadly, and it will be quite high level, so it's primary legislation, so it's not going to be very specific about different sort of how everything is going to work. So if you're expecting, you know, full clarity on how everything's going to work, I'm afraid it's going to be disappointing and you'll have lots of questions. But broadly speaking, there will be a green channel, which is essentially building on two elements of the protocol. One is the customs, the fact that the UK is in Northern Ireland is in the UK customs territory, and building on the fact that there is a not at risk category that's reflective of goods that are moving in the customs territory, and a red channel. And the red channel will be those goods that are moving at risk from GB to NI, at risk of going to Ireland or the EU. In that respect, the entire process that Shonali's outlined there, and the entire TSS functionality and process and everything that we do for those green channel at-risk goods is going to stay exactly the same. That is not going to change, either with the legislation or with any negotiated outcome. So that won't change. The only changes are going to be in that narrow area of goods that are moving entirely within the UK customs territory, which of course Northern Ireland is part of. That's the first element. The green channel, though, will not, and there's been some confusion about the green channel, because obviously you go through the green channel at Heathrow Airport, and that's something you decide you know, on the day, and you make going through the green channel at Heathrow Airport is a customs declaration. It's a declaration by other means, by conduct, but it's still a customs declaration. This is a different thing. This is a green channel, and it's digital, so it's don't expect you know, it's not going to be like big, you know, lanes or anything like that, but it's a digital green channel backed by a trusted trader scheme. So you have to be on the trusted trader scheme in order to take advantage of this. And in that respect, it's very much like the UK trader scheme that we currently have, which is the way that traders get on the you know, prove that their goods are not at risk, and there are certain elements that you have to satisfy in order to get on the UK trader scheme, and these will be similar elements, because essentially you're trying to prove the same thing, which is that your goods are moving in the customs territory and you have control over them, and you know they're moving in the customs territory, and they're not going to leave the customs territory. So there will be a trusted trader scheme that people will enroll will be enrolled onto in order to take advantage of that. So that's the first sort of customs sort of element of it. There are a few other things that will be in the law as well. One is the dual regulatory scheme. This has been much talked about, and I think also not particularly well understood. Essentially, again, this only applies to goods that are, you know, that where the trader's on that trusted scheme, and the goods are moving entirely in the customs territory of the UK. For those goods, traders will be able to choose whether they want to apply UK regulation or EU regulation. If you are one of the 90% of UK traders who trade only in the UK customs territory, you may make it may make economic sense for you to make the choice of UK regulation. If, on the other hand, you have lots of trade in the EU, it may make economic sense for you to pick EU regulation. Similarly, if you have a production facility in Northern Ireland and it's selling to GB and to EU and so on, you may simply choose that it's easier for you just to pick EU regulation. The point is that you'll have a choice. That choice will manifest itself in different ways depending on the products that you're choosing. So obviously, there's a way of doing that that's easier for things that are goods where the difference between UK and EU regulation is, connected to the good itself. So, for example, if the UK has a separate CA mark versus the EU CE mark in the future, appending the UK CA mark, it's relatively easy to track the goods that are going back and forth in that case. If you've got a gene-edited bottle of tomato ketchup or a gene-edited loaf of bread, it's a little easier to track where that goes. But obviously, something like GMO crops, if the UK were ever to allow those under its SPS regulation, that's much more difficult because there's obviously contamination that's possible. The wind will take seeds from Northern Ireland into Ireland, and it may be that that's much more difficult. Well, it is much more difficult to administer. The point is that the legislation won't cover any of the specifics of this, and what the UK government will want to do, and this is where accountants, I think, will play a role, is they'll want to essentially co-design this dual regulatory scheme with business. I mean, they want to know from a business perspective how they see it working. So there'll be quite a lot of consultation after the bill comes out, and I think accountants, play a very important role in working with their clients to try to help in that consultation process. And it is important to think about, it's not just what a particular business wants. So obviously there are sectors in Northern Ireland that are very dependent on supply chains that are, all Ireland supply chains. I'm thinking particularly of people like dairy and meat and so on. And, for those people, clearly the choice is probably going to be for EU regulation anyway. But what my advice to businesses engaged in the process would be is don't worry about the political aspects of this. Don't worry about whether this means that EU market access will be cut off. That's a matter for the governments. That's a matter for the UK and the EU. And clearly, if that's a risk, then that'll be factored into how this process unfolds. But what is really helpful to the government is to understand how your supply chains actually work and how they can therefore, benefit from this. That's dual regulation. Then there are some things about subsidies and taxes that will change. So again, if you're in the customs territory of the UK, clearly UK taxation will apply, and also UK subsidy rules. Now, there is some question about whether that would apply generally in Northern Ireland. We will see when the legislation comes out, the view on that. And then there's obviously the governance aspects of this, which is dispute settlement under the protocol, where what we can certainly say is that if you are moving goods entirely in the UK customs territory and you've chosen UK regulation to apply, any dispute would not be resolved by the European Court of Justice. If, on the other hand, there's a European, regulatory choice and there's a European, dimension to your trade, then clearly, matters of domestic European law will be resolved by the European Court of Justice. So that's, broadly speaking, the major areas of the legislation. The other thing I would point out is we have been under a standstill legally. The standstill means that there can be no new burdens placed on trade with respect to Northern Ireland, and that standstill would continue through this process. So just to give you an example of how that works, in the case of triangular trade, goods that are going, so suppose, just to give you a real example, suppose I'm importing beef from New Zealand, it's going into GB, it's then going into the EU 27, or it's going into Northern Ireland. In the case of it going into the EU 27, that's what's called triangular trade, and the EU rules apply, and therefore, because there hasn't been processing in UK, in GB, those products cannot go into the European Union. They could go, of course, directly into the European Union under the New Zealand beef and EU arrangements. That would normally be the case for Northern Ireland as well, but because of the standstill, those rules that affect triangular trade would not apply to Northern Ireland. So if you've got New Zealand beef going to GB, then going into Northern Ireland, it can continue to flow, and it can continue to flow for as long as that standstill is in place. And the standstill applies, across the board. One specific point I wanted to mention on and to build on some of the things that Shonali has said in terms of what we're doing in TSS to make life easier for traders. The NICTA material is being reorganized to make it easier for you to sort of access it. There is also, very importantly, decision engines being launched to make it even easier to navigate through a particular journey so that you can make the decisions on the supplementary declaration. For example, one decision point would be, do I use an FFD or do I continue to use the simplified process? Well, if you cannot satisfy the UK trader scheme, if you cannot satisfy the UK TCA rule of origin requirements, if there's no other way that you can take advantage of the tariff of a zero tariff or a preferential tariff, then you will want to make the decision to use an FFD, because you'll probably have to use a special procedure or a return goods relief to take advantage of the tariff of a zero tariff. And you need to know that early, because that obviously applies before the goods move. Now, there are some special procedures where you can continue to use an SFD, but for the most part, they are FFD requirements. So the decision engine that's going to be launched shortly will help people understand how those trader journey, how they work, and what you should be advising your client to do. What's the upshot of all of the changes that we anticipate happening when the legislation occurs? Well, first of all, it's only laying the legislation, it's only first reading that's happening on Monday. You've got second reading, you've got House of Lords, you've got multiple back and forth, and obviously this is quite a controversial bill, so there will be a lot of back and forth. We don't anticipate that it'll be concluded, royal assent, for a year, possibly a year. So what's going to happen in the intervening year? Well, first of all, operationally, nothing is going to change. So everything that we've outlined in the past in our materials in NICTA and the webinars and all these things will continue in place. There is a question which we're still, we still don't have an answer on exactly, which is what might happen in the intervening period. Will there be greater simplifications or facilitations in the intervening period? And there might be. It won't be immediate. There certainly won't be announced on Monday, but there might be going forward. So I would keep tracking that. However, in the meantime, because of everything I've said, and also because of the EU's negotiating positions that you can read in their non-papers, one of their non-papers talks about the UK trader scheme being expanded in terms of the scope of benefits and the scope of beneficiaries. So therefore, that whatever happens in the future, negotiated or law or whatever, there will be a massive difference between the not at risk movement and the at risk movement. And there will be considerable simplifications for both. I mean, sorry, for the not at risk as opposed to the at risk. And therefore, there is an increased premium, and this is, I'm going to sound like a broken record on this because I've been saying this for, really from the beginning. There is an increased premium on being on the UK trader scheme if you can be on it. If you are moving entirely in the customs territory, it is really important to get on the UK trader scheme if you can be on it. And I'd highlight there, part of the Northern Ireland standstill agreement is that there is no Northern Ireland, there's no requirement to be based in Northern Ireland to be on the UK trader scheme. So if you're advising a GB supplier, or if your client is a Northern Ireland importer operating on DDP terms, you need to make sure that your GB supplier knows that there's no requirement to be based in Northern Ireland, and it's extremely unlikely they ever would be. So, that should not be a barrier. Now, we know that that has been a barrier for a number of people, and so it's important to get that message across that it's not a barrier, it shouldn't be a barrier, and you should be registering on the UK trader scheme. We are testing various ways of making the trade flow easier for traders. So you'll be hearing about that shortly. And essentially what we are going to be trying to do is to, whatever happens in the future, whatever the outcome, make that GBNI flow as easy as we can for the trader, pulling things off the supply chain as much as we can. Even in the legislated outcome for Green Channel, it's not that there would be nothing for people using the Green Channel. It wouldn't be a customs declaration, but some data would be required, because obviously you need to know who's what is entering Northern Ireland, and the EU certainly would want to know that. So how can we make that data easier? So hopefully the trader just doesn't feel much, if anything. So we are testing ways that can happen, and you'll learn about that shortly. So that's probably as far as I can go to shine a bit of light, I hope, on what is going to be a very murky picture as we start this process next week. But happy to answer any questions on that, or if there are any other questions that relate to what Shonali talked about, or indeed any questions of any kind, happy to go into the Q&A now.
Thank you, Shanker, and thank you, Shonali. I suppose it was great to get an oversight or a reminder to us all of how exactly procedures under the TSS work. And Shanker, thanks for giving us such an insight into the proposed legislation. I know there's a lot of moving parts at the moment, so all will be revealed in the next few months. There's been a couple of questions in. I know Shonali's answered some of them. I suppose the first question, I'd imagine it's a difficult one to answer. The TSS is due to end at the end of this year. The contract was initially for 2 years. What's the likelihood of it continuing? I suppose particularly in the current environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Totally understand the concern that people have. I am a little bit limited in what I can say there, because obviously that is not my decision. It's a decision for HMRC. What I will say, though, in terms of trying to understand how that decision may go, is the TSS contract was originally a 2-year, which expires at the end of this year, a 2-year +1+1 contract. So it was always envisaged that there would be a potential, +1 +1. Now that doesn't mean that it'll be exactly the same in the +1 if there is a +1. But what I would say is that the anticipation at the beginning when that was agreed was that we would be in steady state kind of by now, and certainly maybe even before now, and that traders would be understanding what they have to do and things would be clear. Well, obviously I've just given you a presentation about how everything is going to change. Not everything, but a lot is going to change. And so we're not going to be in steady state. We're going to have to re-educate people on what the processes, what the new processes will be. The law itself is a year-long process, so there's going to potentially be another change at some point in that year or just after that year. So while I can't give you an absolute answer to the question, I think you can assume that support of some kind will continue into next year. And I mean, I will say, though, that to the extent you're concerned about this, what we have said is, you should make those feelings known to HMRC, because I think it's important that they understand where the trader community is on this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know it's a big concern of our members, and we've done a few surveys in recent months, and, you know, over 80% are saying that they wouldn't be able to do the appropriate declarations without the support of the TSS. And, you know, there's a variety of reasons for that. Size of business, the customs intermediary market is very difficult at the moment, and we have been feeding all that back into HMRC, and you know, they just keep saying they're aware of it, and you know, but they can't comment obviously with the issues that are ongoing at the moment. But I suppose that your comments just there just lead on nicely to one of the questions that just popped in. It sounds like the future procedures on GB to NI movements are tweaks to the current protocol. Why do you think the UK government is making the changes unilaterally? Appreciate there's probably a limited amount that you can say there, but, you know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and just finishing up the point about the TSS, I mean, keep feeding through if that is the case. You know, what you just said, Crona, if that's the case, you know, keep feeding that through to the government. I think that one of the other things we've been looking at is how the intermediary market's been developing in Northern Ireland to handle these kinds of things. And what we've found is that even many large traders who had told us at the very beginning of the TSS that they wouldn't be using the TSS, they would be doing it themselves, ended up using the TSS. And indeed, the number of people who are going directly into CDS on these things is very, very small. I think TSS is still carrying well over 95% of the trade from GB to Northern Ireland. So that's another factor that they'll have in mind. With regard to the question about why the UK is acting unilaterally, again, I'm not the UK government, so they will have to answer for themselves. But I would say, first of all, there are certain things that I would describe as evolutions of the protocol. So, for example, the protocol very clearly says that Northern Ireland is in the customs territory of the UK. It very clearly says that there's an at-risk category and a not at-risk category, and that different processes would apply to both. So I think what this is doing is making it clear, making the process that applies to the not at risk category a lot more delineated from at risk, including some of the things that are related to simplification as opposed to just the tariff. You know, when the protocol was implemented, decision of the Joint Committee, it was just the tariff that was dealt with. This is more than that. This is much more of a simplified process, and it's recognizing, I think, the reality of trade into Northern Ireland. The UK government is reacting as it must to a situation where there's certainly evidence, quite a lot of evidence, that GB suppliers are switching off Northern Ireland because of complexity. So there's no doubt that that's occurring. That's just a fact. And while there is also diversion of some trade from GB to Ireland directly to GB to Northern Ireland, to using the sort of northern channel because it seems to be easier, or it's perceived to be easier, that is offset, you know, by the fact that from a UK government perspective, it's not okay to have less choice for Northern Ireland consumers because GB suppliers are just making a decision to switch off Northern Ireland. So they need to do something about that. It would be preferable, as they've repeatedly said, to do that in a negotiated, you know, context with the EU. And I was quite encouraged by the EU's non-papers because they did go a bit further than I think people had been expecting, or that the EU had gone before. But they really don't go far enough, I think, from a UK government perspective. And the other problem is, because there are so many grace periods and easements operating now, a lot of the numbers that the EU is quoting in terms of this would reduce the process by X% or whatever are based on a full implementation of the protocol. Well, you know, if you take away the grace period easement for FPOs by itself, that's an additional 2 to 3 million declarations a year. So that alone would massively increase the burden and the process. And therefore, obviously, if you do something, you're going to lower that a lot. So it doesn't mean that the EU proposals lower the current process. In fact, they would probably increase them if you also added to that full implementation of the protocol. So, I think the problem for the UK government is they would like to negotiate this with the EU, but from the way the EU negotiates, to do some of the things that we're talking about doing in the legislation, the EU would need a new mandate.
Mm-hmm.
That's internal. That's a matter of internal EU law, and the EU is not seeking a new mandate. And so I think the government felt, well, we can't wait forever for the EU to get a new mandate to get this launched, because damage is being done to the east-west strand of the Good Friday Agreement right now. We've done a good job of protecting the north-south strand, but there is pressure on the east-west strand. We have to do something about it. I think that's the UK government's perspective. That's why they're doing this. But certainly, well, let me just be really super clear that nobody is shredding the protocol. Nobody is ripping up the protocol. I appreciate this is the language you will be reading in the newspapers on Monday and Tuesday and so on, but that is not occurring, and that's why Conor Burns, specifically in his testimony on yesterday, referred to this as a recalibration. Now, you might disagree with that word, and you might say, well, what you're talking about is really a bit more than a recalibration. Maybe it is, but it's certainly not. It's certainly within the framework of the protocol and the spirit of the protocol. So those who think the UK government is massively diverging from the EU, is ripping up the protocol, and there may be people on all sides of this who have a vested interest in saying that. That's not accurate, and I think our role here in TSS is sort of to confine ourselves to sort of the facts as we see them, and that's what we see. So I hope that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, and this was just one more comment just before we move on to the kind of the more practical TSS points. Mm-hmm. Just on your comments, and I appreciate you're not the UK government, but obviously you are a sounding board and you see what's happening on the ground. So I suppose all our members are based in Northern Ireland, right, and they're trying to operate the protocol to the best of their ability with all this uncertainty going on in the background. Who are the UK government listening to in terms of these proposals? Are they listening to NI businesses, or is it the GB exporters trying to get into NI? Is it both? Because I suppose the institute itself is represented on a number of bodies and boards, and it's always very GB heavy. And I suppose the concern is that the NI voice at times may not be heard. What's your sense on that?
Yeah, so I think they are listening to both. There's some regular meetings that they have with the Northern Ireland business community, and not just the Northern Ireland Brexit business community, the specific group that has been established to sort of look into this, but also other Northern Ireland businesses that may not feel that they are so represented on those kinds of bodies. So there's pretty wide consultation with Northern Ireland entities. There is, as you say, also consultation with GB entities. And the point about the legislation, I think, is that it's the starting point. So the consultation doesn't end now that the legislation, assuming it goes forward on Monday, assuming if that happens, then that doesn't end the consultation. The consultation continues. And I think that's probably the most important takeaway point here is you will have views and your members will have views and ideas about how a lot of this can be operationalized. And the devil's in the detail here. I mean, how it can be operationalized is the whole game, really. And absolutely, they are very much in the market for continuing ideas about how to operationalize all of this. And it's also important to point out the legislation gives ministers the authority to act. It doesn't actually set out this is what is going to happen. So once the minister has the authority to act, it's secondary legislation that would set out what's going to happen. That will not be in place for a long time, and there's plenty of time for consultation. So nobody should feel like they don't have a voice, because you can, and I would suggest, I'm happy to help you with this, but I would suggest that that Chartered Accountants Ireland, canvasses its members and develops ideas on all of these 5 different areas and feeds that in. because how to operationalize this is going to be very challenging and will require, the best ideas, and I think the UK government will be in the market for all of them.
Yeah, and I suppose, we have to await the EU response as well to all of this, because I'm sure they're going to have, I know they have a draft statement at the moment, but, because it is, all trade is a two-sided thing. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks. So just, I suppose, just a couple of, I know we've only got a few minutes left, just a couple of I suppose, shorter questions. I think what Shonali mentioned during her presentation, the whole declaration of goods at risk. And at the moment, if a trader declares the goods at risk, and then they're found and pays over the duties, and then they're found subsequently not to be at risk, there isn't any mechanism there to refund those duties at the moment. Where does this sit in all of this? Because I know we're talking about green lanes and channels and all that sort of stuff, but it is still a fundamental issue that we have traders that, and we're talking, and I appreciate we're talking about larger traders that don't fall within any of the exemptions, but is there a solution pending, or is all of this proposed legislation going to put this on the back foot, or can you comment on that?
No, so if you are trading, whether it's the current situation, you're an at-risk trader who trades and then subsequently finds that the goods never left Northern Ireland, so you want to claim a rebate of some kind, or whether you are a red channel trader in the future who subsequently finds that actually it stayed in Northern Ireland, and therefore you want to claim a rebate. The same thing is going to apply. And what I can say is I know there's been HMRC is in charge of the whole reimbursement mechanism that would be applicable, and I'm conscious that there hasn't been a lot of progress on that for people, but I think there is now better news on dealing with sort of cash flow issues for traders who have this issue, and I know that we hopefully will be able to say something concrete about this very shortly. Doreen, we've had some interactions on this specific point. Do you want to just sort of outline, where we stand? I don't think we can say anything official yet, but we will be shortly. So, Doreen, I don't know if you can add any color on this.
Yeah, so we have highlighted, hi, good afternoon, everyone. We have highlighted the cash flow issue to her HMRC on numerous occasions, articulating the plight of the traders who are affected by this trapped duty through the Northern Ireland Protocol mechanisms. So what we have given some suggestions to HMRC on alternatives to paying the duty and then reclaiming, and those have now been processed through, and we're, as Shanker says, we're hoping to get some confirmation on how that will be rolled out to traders, so that they will not have to pay the money up front and then reclaim. So, and again, it hasn't been confirmed, but as soon as we have full confirmation, it will be communicated to all business.
Okay, no, that's useful to hear, because I suppose obviously it's been going on for a long time, and I know from speaking to members it's a big issue, and it's a deterrent as well from, I suppose, trading in the NI market. And you mentioned as well, Doreen, and maybe you might be the person to answer this, I don't know. What this proposed legislation will depend on being in the UK Traders Scheme. Have you seen an increase? And I know a lot of the TSS bulletins are telling people to get on the trader scheme, Have you seen an increase in applications? Would you be recommending our viewers register if they haven't already? And I appreciate there's a little bit of an application process and a time lag on that, but would that be your recommendation that you do go ahead and try and get on that scheme?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I couldn't stress that more. And we have been, relentless about telling people to get on the UK Trader Scheme if they can. What we also do is there are a number of people who have made applications that have been rejected. And if your application has been rejected, what we would ask you to do is get in touch with us so that we can work through why it's been rejected, whether we can help you, and it may have been rejected simply because you didn't phrase the application properly, and we can help you with that. So we've had a number of cases actually and Doreen and Shanali and others in the team, Magda and others, have been very instrumental in helping traders to phrase their applications in the right way, and actually, put their best foot forward. So absolutely, if you've got a rejection, please get in touch. Now, we may not be able to help you, but in many cases we have been, and sometimes the turnaround has been pretty quick.
Okay, and as you mentioned earlier, there is no, I know the requirement to be NI based hasn't come in yet. As you said, it's probably unlikely to at this stage. So just to, keep reminding, we've been reminding readers of our, Brexit bulletins that go out, that, you don't have to have a presence in NI to get onto the UK trader scheme. So that's
yeah. I mean, one of the problems there, I think, is some of the material, because it was created before the exception came in, looks like that's the headline thing that you need, and so people sort of stop reading at that point, and that's a bit unfortunate. We are working on trying to improve the way that reads, so that people realise that actually the biggest challenge on the UK trader scheme is, can you show that you're selling to retail? Can you show that you have control? And obviously the processor, the goods subject to processing exemption, does cause a lot of people to be unable to be on the scheme as it currently is framed. So and we're conscious of that, but it's sort of what I would ask your members to canvass their clients about is, what is it exactly that's keeping you off the scheme? Because that's information that at TSS we'd like to know, because we know anecdotally and with a little bit of data that things like goods subject to processing is keeping a lot of people off the scheme. Other things like if goods, particularly for the steel sector, if goods are subject to trade remedies, you can't be on the scheme, and that does affect a lot of, there's if in a particular product area that could be total, it could be a total ban. And if that product area is important like steel, it's really detrimental. So knowing that helps us to sort of advocate. We think that if you were to secure a change to that, that would really help traders, because that's disproportionately keeping people off the scheme. So getting that kind of data from your members and their clients would be invaluable.
Okay. Well, that's something for us all to bear in mind. Well, I think we're 2 minutes to 2, so we've no more questions that have come in, so we might just call a halt and give people a little bit of time back. I suppose Shanker, Shanali, Doreen, and Andrea knows in the background there. I just want to say thank you so much again for joining us. Thanks to Zara, Gary, and Karen from the Ulster Society side for putting on the webinar. As I said, the slides, which are much more detailed than what Shanali went through, are available, will be circulated, as will the recording. And as always, if anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the Institute. We're always looking for feedback on EU exit matters in particular. So look, that's all I'd say. So I suppose enjoy your afternoon and enjoy your weekend, and thank you so much for joining.